What's a Grape Explorer talking about today? So we are winging our way to the holidays, getting closer and closer. So wanted to do some videos that I thought were kind of like conducive to the holidays, but at the same time, I have a very big passion for. This is called Vintage Port. And as you can see, this is one of the big boys, Taylor Fladgate, and it's one of the best of the best. This is actually a 2002, and it's a beautiful Single Quinta, which we call Vargellas and Vargellas. And this is 2002. So I just want to show, as we always do appropriately on the map, we have this red-orange area right here, which is called the Douro Valley right here. And this is very interesting for a number of reasons. Historical, because this is a UNESCO site, and a lot of the vineyards here are terraced, so they're very steep terraces, and of course you have the Douro River. And when I say of course, I know that some people might not know, but remember now, we always talked about vineyards that are near rivers, and this actual vineyard is very close to the vineyard. We want to kind of zoom in a little bit and see it's 2002. And vintage port is really interesting because they don't declare the vintage every year. So if they have an outstanding vintage like 2002 is, you know, they do what's called a declaration where they declare the vintage. Now, sometimes they don't, because it might be a vintage that doesn't come up to the standards of what they feel. So there's a lot of rules and regulations here. So it's a minimum of 2 years. And this wine was bottled in 2004. So we got 2 years in the barrel. But we want to talk a little bit about port because, you know, I have a little bit of a British background. My mom was British, and, you know, grandparents lived in Bexley, Kent, England. So came from a British background on that side of the fence. But the British adored port. And there's a reason for that. Because historically, at one time, the French had actually, did an embargo, and England was not allowed to buy French wines during the wars in 1700s, and basically what became the appetite, so to say, for the English or the British was vintage port. But there's a reason for that, because what English shippers or importers used to do was they would buy the barrels and they would fortify. Ports were fortified with brandy, and they would make that long, treacherous voyage from Portugal here all the way to England, and basically they did that not to spoil the wines. So, but what that created was a beautiful product called vintage port. And so we wanted to really break this out because the holidays again are coming, and we got big Thanksgiving weekend coming. So a lot of people, we were breaking out very interesting wines, especially out of the cellar. So, but we want to give a shout out to Steve Remming. He's a good friend. He was the one that was sharing a lot of information about port. He actually represents Co-Brand, and they represent these producers here. They represent Taylor, they represent Fonseca, and they represent Croft. I consider that to be like the Yankee outfield, or the greatest of the greatest port houses that were ever producing port. But port's got a really long history. We're talking, well over 2,000 years ago, they were producing wines in Portugal. But even to this day, it's one of the few areas of the world, especially in this area, there's no tractors that can actually pick the grapes. So everything here is all done manually. They pick the grapes by manual harvest because they're trellised vineyards. It's a UNESCO site, which, remember now, we talked about UNESCO, so you really can't touch the ground with any kind of machinery, any kind of tractors. So it's all hand-picked. And they still, to this day, especially in this quinta, they press it by feet. So they do the old trotting like this, back in, the day that a lot of wine was made that way. But in port, they still to this day, especially this quinta, does that. And this is just a beautiful property. We actually found it on the map. So we wanted to we broke out Hugh Johnson's map so we can actually identify where this property is and its proximity to the river. So you can see it's right there along the river. It's quite famous property. Again, this is a single quinta or single vineyard, and it's produced only in exceptional years, which 2002. And we got to talk about the grapes too, because we are the Grape Explorer here. So the grapes are Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, and Tinta Roriz. And those are the three grapes that actually go into port. And there's a lot of rules here. So you can see This is, you can see the this band that comes here. And there's a reason for this because, as I talk about the past, the present, and the future, when I was buying ports close to 30 years ago, I was actually buying a lot of ports in England because at one time the merchants in England, again, they would buy the barrels, they would ship them to London for bottling, and then they would store the wines in bond in England. Very, 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 very famous. So, but Portugal did not want this to happen, as we got about 20 years ago. So everything now is coming here, and this identifies that it comes directly from Portugal, and it's not bottled in England. I mean, I bought 55 ports and, some sublime ports, especially Taylor, which were fabulous. But enough talking. Let's talk about this wine because I think that this is fabulous. Now, 2002, think about that, bottled in 2004. So guess what? It's 20 years, which is kind of cool. So, but when you drink vintage port, and this is why I wanted to break out something that's very traditional, especially in England. This is Stilton, which comes from England, and then also these are walnuts, and these are the perfect accompaniment to port. This is like what we consider after the meal. You want a nice port, but Stilton cheese. Look at this blue vein. And of course, if you're British, it's only Stilton. We don't do any other blue vein cheese because it goes with the port. But let's taste the cheese, which is fabulous. Oh, and that's beautiful. Oh, it just brings out the Stilton. Wow, this is beautiful cheese. And actually, they also tell you that you should try walnuts with port after dinner again, because a lot of these wines have a little bit of a porty, a lot of walnutty character from the oak. Oh, that's good. Yeah, you get the nuttiness from the port, but again, full bodied. And these are wines that you can actually age 20, 30 years. Maybe even longer in the cellar. Some of the people today are drinking 45 ports and, some of the greatest monumental vintages. But I think the most important thing for us to educate people on port is that it's fun. And the whole idea here is, especially during the holidays, we come up to Christmas and Thanksgiving, so big meal, and you want to break out something really cool for dessert, or not only for dessert, but after dessert, you have a nice bottle of vintage port, and you break out the Stilton cheese, and you also break out the walnuts, and this is a beautiful expression of the wine business that I love and adore. Again, I love fine wines, but when it comes to port, unmatched. There is an unmatched wine here in the world that nobody can rival except for Portugal in vintage port. Again, it's Grape Explorer. We're always talking about great, great wines, and we got one right here, Taylor Fladgate 2002. What a magnificent wine. Cheers.